You may have heard of the 7 I am sayings of Jesus recorded in John's Gospel. I'm going to speak to you today about the least well-known one. Jesus said in John chapter 10 verse 7, I am the gate for the sheep. And again in verse 9, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. Many of the sheep pens in ancient times were out on the open hillside. It was often just a rough ring of stones built up with briars or a vine grown over the top for a roof, but it had no actual door or gate on it. Once all the sheep had been brought in for the night, the shepherd himself would lie down across the entrance to the pen. He would become the gate. He was the one who would protect the sheep from any predators or thieves. When Jesus said he was the gate for the sheep and whoever enters through him will be saved, he was probably thinking of these rustic sheep pens out on the open hillside that people were so familiar with the shepherd lying there across the entrance, becoming the actual door or gate for the sheep. When Jesus said, I am the gate, he was making a very exclusive claim for himself. He was telling the people that only through him could people find security and salvation. Remember in John chapter 14 verse 6, where Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, the gate. He was also saying that whoever enters through him would be saved. It is his promise, and he is the only one who has the authority to say this to anyone because he is God in the flesh. This was such a contrast to the message that most of Jesus' hearers were used to hearing. They were used to having endless religious duties and obligations laid upon them. And they knew no matter how hard they tried, they could never live up to the required standard of the law of God or the standards imposed by the religious leaders. And because the religious leaders of the time were so inflexible and harsh, there was always the fear and uncertainty of maybe being thrown out of the synagogue. You can read about that in the previous story John tells. But Jesus' message was so completely different. It wasn't about rules and regulations or threats and intimidation. He knew that we are all like sheep that have gone astray, and each one of us has turned to our own way, as the prophet Isaiah said. And that is why Jesus came with a very simple message and a promise. He said that whoever will may come, and if they enter through him, they will be saved. How can this be? Because, as Isaiah also said, the Lord has laid on him, that is on Jesus, the iniquity of us all. What a message of certainty and security, because Jesus gave his life for us. He is our gate. The whole point of a sheep pen is that the sheep will be safe. And in this image, it is the shepherd, Jesus himself, who is providing the safety and the security. Our salvation is not in the hands of someone else. It is Jesus Christ himself who saves us and who keeps us. We are secure in him. You couldn't fail to read this passage and see the strong contrast between the true shepherd and the thieves and the robbers who steal and kill and destroy. It talks about the relationship between a shepherd and his sheep. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. He goes on ahead of them. They follow him because they know his voice. All of this strikes such a note of comfort because we can sense the relationship between a shepherd and his sheep. As the sheep are out grazing on the hillside during the day, they're used to hearing the shepherd as he whistles or sings. They're used to his voice as he calls them from time to time or warns them of danger. At night, when they are safely gathered into the pen, they're used to his voice speaking to them, and they hear him as he wards off any predators that come. In the morning, he calls them out to pasture again. Day by day, they hear his voice. They've learned to recognize it, and they respond to him. What a picture Jesus is giving here of the heart of God when he says that the shepherd calls them by name. Never forget this amazing truth. God knows you by name. He calls you by name. Timothy Keller said this: "The founders of every major religion say, 'I'll show you how to find God.' Jesus said, 'I am God who has come to find you.' He comes and he calls you by name. Calling you by name suggests relationship, and Jesus is the gate. He is the one through whom you enter and can have a relationship with God. He is the only one through whom you can have a relationship with God and be accepted by God. He is the only gate that we may enter to find salvation. If we have truly entered the sheep pen through Jesus, we too will learn to know his voice. We will hear him calling our name, not just in our initial salvation, but in our daily walk with him. It's important to keep hearing his voice, calling our name and calling us always to green pastures.